Hey, I'm Matt LeMay, and welcome to my garage. Today, we're going to talk about the Kyosho Scorpion. Now, this is the 50th anniversary edition, and I actually acquired this car. My wife bought this for our wedding anniversary. It was our 23rd wedding anniversary, fairly recently, and yeah, she got me this. How awesome is that, right? I've always wanted one of these. Well, I say always, ever since I had my dune buggy. I had a full-size dune buggy for a fairly short amount of time, and since having that, you know how you get the bug. People who have motorcycles, they just have to have a motorcycle and stuff like that, RC motorcycle. So yeah, so after having that dune buggy, I just wanted something that looked like a real dune buggy, you know, not a buggy. You know, the A-arms and stuff, all this is awesome for racing. It doesn't look like an actual full-scale dune buggy, right? But this does, and that is why I think this is so special. This is just such an amazing looking buggy. So let's go ahead and take it over to the bench and take a look at it. So here we are with the Kyosho Scorpion. Again, it's the 50th anniversary edition. You can see there. Now, this buggy's been around for a while, and I believe this re-release here has been around since, what, 2014 or something like that. But I just think it's such a cool buggy. It's just, like I said, it's got something the other buggies don't, and, well, with the exception of a couple other Kyosho Beetles and buggies, right? It looks like the real deal. It looks like an actual full-scale dune buggy, and I mean, that's just what makes it so awesome. So you can see that the trailing arms here, now they are cast aluminum. They're not plastic, which is really cool. Of course, they're not billet aluminum either, but they are cast aluminum, and they have been cleaned up nicely, and they've been slightly polished. The gearbox is also cast aluminum. Here you have the front suspension. Again, they're both kind of this trailing arm design like is found in actual dune buggies that are based off of the Volkswagen platform. Now, the shocks on this are also aluminum bodied shocks. They do have a plastic collar and a plastic bottom shock retainer here. And this collar has got an Allen screw in it, so you can adjust it up and down. You can set your preload or ride height for the buggy here. The fronts, actually, I'll probably end up adjusting down just a little bit to get a little bit more preload on the front. Maybe on the rear once I get a motor in there. There's no motor in there right now, clearly. I actually just built this buggy, and I haven't even put electronics in it. I haven't put a motor in it or anything like that. But it's pretty exciting because I'm going to get to do that. And I'm thinking about going with a 17.5 brushless system, but we'll talk about that later. So yeah, the tires on this thing are just awesome. You don't normally get these aggressive, large, knobby tires anymore. Normally it's, nowadays, you know, you get either what, chevron treads, you get different tread styles, but the pins on these new tires and the tread designs have just gotten much smaller than the old school big knobbies, right? And I just think these look so cool. They're very aggressive. They're actually pretty soft as well. The front tires are hard. They're not soft at all. But they don't have to be. You really don't want the front tires rolling because they're ribbed. You want these to be hard, and you want them just to kind of dig in, and you don't want them to give out under the pressure. But the rear tires, you do want to be soft because you want them to get grip. So I think that's really cool. The wheels on it are actually plastic, though they look aluminum. They're very, very cool. In person, they look great. I mean, they actually look like real aluminum in person. Sitting up on the shelf, I've got a Blackfoot there. It's a re-release Blackfoot that has actual vintage C's aluminum wheels on it. And these look, you really can't tell. I mean, it's a shame because I wish the aluminum was like, yeah, that's aluminum and this is plastic, but you really can't tell the difference. They look the same. They look like polished aluminum. So anyway, now inside the gearbox here, you have, oh, I should mention, a lot of stuff on this buggy was already built, right? It came pre-built. The whole gearbox, the shocks, they were all built. You do have to assemble quite a bit of things, the frame rails and all that stuff. You got to put the suspension together. This bar here was kind of a pain. That was really the only difficult part about this build was this here. And I guess it was more frustrating than it was difficult. But you know what, speaking of that, let's talk about the front suspension a little bit and how this is held on. So you have these trailing arms that just slide onto this rod right here. And the only thing that holds them on is this upright, where this this link is attached to. That upright has got a set screw, and that set screw holds that entire assembly on. So if you want to remove this whole assembly from this rod, you just remove that one set screw and it just slides off. That is awesome. I mean, it's a really cool design. I like the design. Now, keep in mind, I know we're gonna run this and stuff, but I mean, we already know that this isn't going to be as good, say, as the buggy I showed you earlier with the, you know, with the A-arms, upper and lower A-arms and all that stuff. This design isn't exactly for racing. It's more for the retro, you know, that looks awesome look. And you can tell, you know, it toes in quite a bit, you know, when you do the suspension. And so, I mean, it's not necessarily going to be an amazing racing buggy, although it'll probably do fairly well. But that's not really what this buggy is for. This buggy is to look awesome, and that's what it does. It looks awesome. So inside the gearbox, there is a gear differential, and it is sealed. Though there's grease in it, but it is sealed, and I imagine you could put some oil in it. I haven't tried. I'm just going to use the layout it has right now. The differential is actually really smooth. Now, it's really loose. Don't get me wrong, it is loose, but it's really smooth. So that's a bonus. You know, again, I'm not going to be racing with this, so I'm not going to really mess with the diff. So you have a diff, then you have an idler gear inside. On the, let me take off this cover. Oh, I guess I'll show you the cover first. You do have a dust cover right here, which protects a reduction gear, which also doubles as the spur gear, and it will protect the pinion gear once the motor is in there, and the slipper clutch. So as you can see, we have this spur. Now, of course, the motor pinion will be coming through here, and it'll mate up against this spur gear. The spur gear is also a reduction gear. It actually reminds me of the older style transmissions, like in the Blackfoot. If anybody ever had a Blackfoot or a Monster Beetle or a Frog or something like that, you had these reduction gears inside the gearbox. And while this particular gear here is, the center gear is a 21 tooth, and then the outer gear on this one is a 38 tooth. And that gives you, what, a 691 reduction. Now it does come with, here's the pinion gear that goes along with that particular setup, which is a 31 tooth pinion gear. And it does include some spare parts, which has a diff rebuild kit, a shock rebuild kit, some extra screws, and it comes with another pinion gear as well as another spur gear. Now this pinion gear in here is a 28 tooth, and that goes with the 41 tooth spur gear. Now unfortunately, this motor mount is not adjustable, right? So you can't just change the pinion gear to whatever you want and slide the motor, you know, so the pinion mates with the spur gear. But it's still kind of neat that they gave you an option so you can change. So if you change the spur gear, you have to change the pinion gear. Otherwise it would be too tight or it would be too loose. So when you go with a smaller spur gear, you have to have the larger pinion gear. Or if you go with the larger spur gear, you need the smaller pinion. So it's still an option that they give you. It's still pretty cool that you get to choose high gearing or low gearing, ultimately, is your choice. So against the 21 tooth reduction gear is a slipper clutch. Now this is your average run-of-the-mill spring-loaded slipper clutch. It's adjustable by, I believe that's a 17mm nut. It's got a lock nut on there. And you have ultimately plates going against plates, and it's a friction slipper clutch. The tighter you make it, the more locked it's going to be. The looser you have that nut, the more it's going to slip. So that's beneficial. I mean, most of us know what a slipper clutch does, but just to go into a little bit, it's beneficial if you have really, really loose dirt and you're taking off and you're just trigger happy. Ultimately, you can avoid even using a slipper clutch if you just have really good throttle control. But if you don't, and you just like stabbing the throttle because you get excited, as we all do, then you can adjust that slipper clutch so when you stab the throttle, it's not just going to light up the tires and you're just going to do donuts. You can cause a slip, so it'll take a little bit to get going, and it just gives you more control under hard acceleration. Now, as we said, inside is a gear differential, which has, it's your typical gear differential. You have 4 planetary gears, which rotate around 2 sun gears, right? The sun gears are they ride on these diff outdrive here, these cups, diff cups. There's just a pin that goes through the end of the cup, and the gear has a slot, it slides on there. Your typical setup like found in I don't know how many thousands of different vehicles, right? It's a tried and true setup. It works good. This includes a dog bone, so you have 2 ultimately, female dog bone, diff cups, axle cup, your dog bone rides in the middle of it. Again, the dog bone style, it's not going to be the smoothest setup over time because as we know, the dog bones eventually start to dig into the diff cups and then they create almost a clicking or a catching. But it is a very durable setup as far as it just keeps working. Right? It generally, now I don't know, I mean, I guess if you completely overpower these, you can break the diff outdrive cup or even the axle cup. But generally speaking, they're a pretty sturdy setup and they work well, especially when they're new. And it's a good idea if you're going to run in dirt and stuff to periodically clean these. You know, take them out, wash them out with some, I don't know, some simple green or some just regular dish soap, and then dry them and re-grease them. It'll keep them running better. The more dirt and dust you get within that dog bone diff cup there, it's going to start acting like sandpaper as you're driving, and ultimately it's going to make it wear faster. So it's a good idea to go ahead and clean those periodically. Okay, because this body is kind of a pain to get on and off, it's really neat that there's a battery tray on the bottom. Now I just pulled the clip. It comes with a very, very small clip. And now this is a very simple design, but it works, you know. It's not hinged anywhere like you would kind of expect it to be hinged, but it does have an aluminum tab here that when you lift up, as you can see, you lift up, which is kind of spring-loaded almost because you're stressing the plastic a little bit, and you just kind of wiggle it out. And that just fits inside this aluminum tab, which is kind of a good idea instead of a hinge because the hinge would eventually wear, it would get dirt in it, just like we discussed, you know, the dirt and sand becoming sandpaper, kind of like it'll wear it out quicker. This has got just, it's going to keep dirt out because of the way it's designed. The dirt's going to hit it and go over it. Unless you're driving in reverse a whole lot, then you might pack the dirt in there. But yeah, it's got a fairly large battery compartment. And now, as we'll talk about in a little bit, you can see the holes in the battery compartment to get the wires through, right? Very large holes. This is not waterproof, right? It's not watertight. There's no seal on here. It just fits on, which is fine if you're not going to be driving through a lot of water. Now, let me get that clip back in there. All right, so let's talk about the roll cage. We'll take off the body and we'll take a look at the tub in here, okay? The roll cage snaps on in the back. Now the roll cage is mounted to the upper body. This has a 2-piece body. Well, this is actually hard plastic, and this is like a Lexan type body on top. And you can see the seam right here, right here. So the first thing you do is like a little latch. You just pull that forward, and then you release the back here and here, where this roll cage clips on to this plastic cage back here. The roll cage also clips on to this aluminum roll bar. So we're going to release both of them. Now, I wouldn't want to do this a whole lot because it's going to put stress right here. Every time we remove this roll cage and we pop it, it's going to stress that out. Now, there is one body clip that'll go right there. I didn't have it in, but there is a body clip that goes there. Now, the tricky part, once you've already done that, is you've got to get this out from in between these shock towers. And the little screws on the inside of these shock towers just rub the inside of the body. So the best way to do it is to lift the body up and then try to slide it back a little bit. And then as you're doing this, you just squeeze here and you try to get it to remove. Now, no matter how good you are at that, you're still going to have a little bit of contact between this screw here, and there's one on the other side as well, and the body. And eventually that's gonna wear out that decal and scratch the body and stuff like that. Now, not that big of a deal, because once you get your electronics and stuff in here, you can put your battery in through the bottom, and you really shouldn't have to remove this much, right? Except for, they recommend putting the on and off switch inside here on the back. Not quite sure what I'm going to do there yet, but I don't think I want to take off the body every time I want to turn it on and off, especially since I don't have to take off the body to put the battery in. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But I think we can figure something else out. Now, as you can see, we were talking about the suspension. You can see the steering here. This is a spring-loaded servo saver, and it is adjustable, so that's pretty cool. Well, I say it's adjustable. Let me look here. Maybe it's not adjustable. Yeah, I believe it is. You just tighten down that nut. So, yeah, spring-loaded servo saver right there. And you see this rubber grommet, right? You see that rubber grommet there for the steering rod. Now, that's to keep water out. And when I first saw that, I thought, oh, cool, this thing's waterproof. No, it's not waterproof, because we were just talking about these holes that are in the bottom that go to the non-waterproofed battery compartment. So if you are going to drive in puddles and fairly deep water and you're thinking, oh yeah, I'll just keep it below this line here, well, you're still going to fill this whole compartment with water. So not a good idea. It is pretty cool though that it does have the flat bottom though, so just skipping across some puddles, this will most likely, especially with the bumper here, the way the water is gonna, most likely it'll just kind of dance across some puddles and it'll be fine. However, I'm going to try to avoid water just because I don't want to get them in there. I mean, it would be kind of cool if this thing was completely waterproof and it would almost float like a little boat, but you know, it's not, and it's not going to. So there it is. Now I'm going to decide on a few electronics for this buggy. I think it'll be, I mean, just a blast to drive. There are, I should mention, the instructions were pretty good. Excuse me. The instructions were pretty good. They weren't terrible. They were pretty good. It does have exploded views and stuff like that. Like I said, it did come with you know, spare parts. It comes with some 25 weight silicone, which I actually haven't even put in the shocks yet. You just disassemble, or you just pull the shock apart, put it in there, you know, tap it a little bit, not this, but the shock, to try to get the air bubbles out and stuff. It did come with a bottle of thread lock, so as you put it together, you can thread lock things. It comes with 3 different servo horns, 23, 24, and 25 tooth servo horns. And that's for like, what, your high-tech San Juan Futaba servos. So you can use pretty much whatever servo you want. It comes with a thing of grease that you grease it up as you're building it. 3 Allen wrenches, which of course are the needed sizes. It comes with your regular T-wrench here, or T-socket. And it also comes with another wrench here, which is pretty cool. It's got a little thing on the bottom to grip the bottom of the shock. It's got a thing here, that little slot in there is for like the tie rod ends, I guess, or maybe even the shock cap. You know, it can be used for a few different things. And then you have a 5mm, 5.5, and a 7mm wrench on the end of it. So it's actually a pretty cool little wrench here. It also comes with this here for when you're building the tie rods and stuff, you're screwing them in, the tie rod slips in here and you can crank it a little bit easier than using just your fingers on the tie rod. Still kind of a pain, but it does help. And we have a few other parts here that are going to be for the antenna, for mounting the on-off switch on, and these are some stands that you put the steering servo onto to raise it up just a little bit. We also have some mounting tape for the ESC and also for the receiver. So pretty cool setup. Here's you can see I did use some of the decals clearly. And if you're not really into painting, it does come with a cockpit set of decals, so you can just kind of put these on the cockpit. You don't really have to paint that separately. Personally, I much prefer a hand-painted driver, and I'll show you what I did with mine here. I don't know if this is focusing. Let me turn on this light real quick just to give you a little bit more light on this driver if I can. I don't know if that's too bright, but there you have it. There's the driver. I just kind of painted him to look, I don't know, surprised. That's what he kind of looks like. But yeah, there you go. Turn that back off. That's pretty bright. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and find some electronics for this thing and a receiver and all that good stuff. Find a battery to put in it and maybe go ahead and get this thing running. I am going to stop the video here. There'll be another video. Just click on the next video and that'll be the running video.